purport discusses Srila Haridas Thakur. So we'll talk about his disappearance, which is very, very special, has a lot of historical significance in understanding the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, but also the teachings of Haridas Thakur as the Namacharya, or the Acharya means the teacher by example, and Nam means the name of Krishna. So he was the one that actually is the example, if you want to chant the holy names, to follow in the footsteps of Srila Haridas Thakur. So I'll put up today's verse. Give me 1 second. I just need from the people that are at home to, Mother Shubharati, do you want me to share the screen?
I just now shared the screen. Do you want to share? Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I will make you host and you can do it, yes.
Okay, that way it'll, because I'm going to go at a certain
Yes.
point, it gets, Srila Prabhupada talks about various points, and then I will.
Okay. Yeah, you can share now.
Okay.
Do you want me to send you the link?
Me? No.
For the, okay.
I have it here. Oops. Can everyone see this now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 This is the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, text number 30. I'll chant the Sanskrit. Those that are we'll do a call and response here in the temple. And then when we're done here, I'll ask the devotees that are on Zoom that you can also chant. And you'll chant it straight through. Sabhuta shukshmendriya sanikasharam. Manomayam devayam. Manomayam deva mayam vikarayam. Samshara gatya sahatena yati. Vijnana tattvam guna san nirodham. Sabhutva sukshmendriya san nikasharam. Manomayam deva mayam vikarayam. Samsadhyagatya sahatena yati. Vijnana tattvam guna sanirodham. The chat. Sabhuta sukshmendriya sanikarsham. Manomayam deva mayam vikarayam. Samsadhya gatya satena yati. Jnana tattvam guna sanirodham. Sabhuta sukshmendriya sanikarsham. Manomayam deva mayam vikaryam. Samsarya gatya sahatena yati. Vijnana tattvam guna samirodham. Sabhuta sukshmendriya sanikarsham. Manomayam deva mayam vikaryam. Samsarya gatya sahatena yati. Vijnana tattvam guna sanirodham.
Sabhuta sukmendriya sanikaksham.
Sabhuta sukshmendriya sanikarsham.
Manomayam devamayam vikarmam.
Manomayam devayam vikaryam.
Samsadhyagatya sahatena yati.
Samsarya gatya sasena gati.
Vijnana tattvam gunasanirodham.
Jnana tattvam guna sanirodham.
Sabhuta sukshmendriya sannikarsham manomayam devamayam vikaryam samsatyagatya sateniyati vijnana tattvam gunasannirodham.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Sabhuta sukshmendriya sannikarsham.
Sabhuta sukshmendriya sanikarsham.
Manomayam devamayam vikaryam.
Manomayam devayam venikaryam.
Samsatyagatya sahatena yati.
Samsarya gatya sahatena yati.
Jnana tattvam gunasannirodham.
Vijnana tattvam guna sanirodham.
Hare Krishna.
Sabhuta sukshmenandriya sannikarsham
Sabhuta sukshmendriya sanikarsham.
manomayam devamayam vikaryam
Manomayam devayam vikaryam.
samsadhya gatya sahatena yati
Samsarya gatya sahatena yati.
vijnana tattam sannirodham.
Vijnana tattvam guna sanirodham.
Hare Krishna.
Anyone else? We'll go to the synonyms. Saha, he, the devotee. Bhutva, the gross. Sukshma, and the. Oh, sorry, in the subtle. Indriya, senses. Saniksharam. Thank you, Prabhu. No, that's good. You got it right. I did. Let's say it again. Sanikarsham. The point of neutralization. Manamayam. The mental plane. Deva Mayam. In the mode of goodness. Vikaryam. Egoism. Samsadhya. Surpassing. Gatya. By the progress. Saha. Along with. Tena. Them. Yati. goes.
goes.
Vijnana,
Vijnana,
perfect knowledge.
perfect knowledge.
Tattvam,
Tattvam,
truth.
truth.
Guna,
Guna,
the material modes. Sani Rodham,
Anirodham,
completely suspended.
Lilitham.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. The devotee, thus surpassing the gross and the subtle forms of coverings, enters the plane of egoism. And in that status, he merges the material modes of nature, ignorance and passion. In this point of neutralization, and thus reaches egoism in goodness. After this, all egoism is merged in the Mahat Tattva, and he comes to the point of pure self-realization. Purport. Pure self-realization, as we have several times discussed, is the pure consciousness of admitting oneself to be an eternal servitor of the Lord. Thus, one is reinstated in his original position of transcendental loving service to the Lord, as will be clearly explained in the following verse. This stage of rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord without any hopes of emolument from the Lord or any other way can be obtained when the material senses are purified and the original pure state of the senses is revived. It is suggested herein that the process of purifying the senses is by the yogic way. Namely, the gross senses are merged in the mode of ignorance, and the subtle senses are merged into the mode of passion. The mind belongs to the mode of goodness, and therefore is called Deva Maya, or godly. Perfect purification of the mind is made possible when one is fixed in the conviction of being an eternal servitor of the Lord. Therefore, simple attainment of goodness is also a material mode. One has to surpass this stage of material goodness and reach the point of purified goodness, or Vasudev Sattva. This Vasudev Sattva helps one enter into the kingdom of God. We may also remember in this connection the process of gradual emancipation by the devotees in the manner mentioned above. Although authoritative, is not viable in the present age because of people's being primarily unaware of yoga practice. The so-called yoga practice by the professional protagonist may be physiologically beneficial, but such small successes cannot help one in the attainment of spiritual emancipation, as mentioned herein. Srila Prabhupada is basically saying that although the yogic practice is very bona fide, it's not taught in its full contents, and nor is it not taught. One of the reasons it's not taught is it can't be practiced in this current age. And what we see is just more of the asanas, maybe some pratyahara, or maybe some pranayam, some breathing or some belly exercises. But the goal from front all the way to its ultimate attainment of samadhi is not taught, nor is it really practical in the current times that we're living in. 5,000 years ago, when the social status of human society was in perfect Vedic order, the yoga process mentioned herein was common affair for everyone, because everyone, and especially the Brahmana and the Kshatriya, was trained in the transcendental art under the care of a spiritual master, far away from home, in the status of brahmacharya. Modern man, however, is incompetent to understand it perfectly. So brahmacharya is the state in early life, the first perhaps 25 years of one's life, where one gets all their education and training. They live a celibate life. And in that time, these principles of yoga were instilled and embedded within one's life. So as they went into grihastha, family life, and then later on in life, and they executed their duties in this world, it was just very natural for them to execute this yogic philosophy. It was ingrained within their fabric of living. That is not today. Now we teach people how to play video games and, play sports and do all, figure out how to make the most amount of money. Lord Chaitanya, Lord Sri Chaitanya, therefore made it easier for the prospective devotee of the present age in the following specific manner. Ultimately, there is no difference in the result. The first and foremost point is that one must understand the prime importance of bhakti yoga. The living beings in different species of life are undergoing different terms of engagement according to their fruitive actions and reactions. But in the execution of different activities, one who secures some resources in bhakti yoga can understand the importance of service to the Lord through the causeless mercy of the Lord, as well as that of the spiritual master. A sincere soul is helped by the Lord through meeting a bona fide spiritual master, the representative of the Lord. By the instructions of such a spiritual master, one gets the seed of bhakti. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends that the devotee sow the seed of bhakti yoga in his heart and nurture it by the watering of hearing and chanting of the holy name, fame, etc. of the Lord. The simple process of offenselessly chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord will gradually promote one very soon to the stage of emancipation. There are 3 stages of chanting of the holy name of the Lord. The first stage is the offensive chanting of the holy name. The second is the reflective stage of chanting the holy name. And the third stage is the offenseless chanting of the holy name of the Lord. In the second stage only, the stage of reflection between the offensive and offenseless stages, one automatically attains the stage of emancipation. Emancipation sometimes is defined as liberation or freedom from the material modes of nature, freedom from this material world. And in this offenseless stage, one actually enters into the kingdom of God. Although physically he may apparently be within the material world. To attain the offenseless stage, one must be on guard in the following manner. This is really good. Srila Prabhupada really gets very deep into the holy name. Right here. As I said, with Srila Haridas Thakur's disappearance day today, this is Krishna's arrangement and Mother Shobha Radhi's arrangement that we are hearing this purport today. When we speak of hearing and chanting, it means that not only should one chant and hear the holy name of the Lord as Ram, Krishna, or systematically the 16 names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But one should also read and hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of devotees. The primary practice of bhakti yoga will cause the seed already sown in the heart to sprout. And by the regular watering process, as mentioned above, And what was the watering? Devotees. And the other was chanting. Yeah. So Shravanam, and they call it Shravanam and Kirtam Jal. Jal is water, so the water of hearing and chanting. Okay. By systematically nurturing, the creeper will grow to such an extent that it will penetrate the covering of the universe, as we have heard from the previous verses. It'll reach the effulgent sky, the Brahmajyoti, and go farther and farther and farther and reach the spiritual sky, where there are innumerable spiritual planets called the Vaikuntha Lokas. Above all of them is Krishna Loka, or Goloka Vrindavan, wherein the growing creeper enters and takes repose at the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, the original personality of Godhead. When one reaches the lotus feet of Lord Krishna at Goloka Vrindavan, the watering process of hearing and reading, as also chanting of the holy name in the pure devotional stage, fructifies, and the fruits grown there in the form of love of God are tangibly tasted by the devotee, even though he is here in this material world. That's so beautiful. The ripe fruits of love of God are relished only by the devotees constantly engaged in the watering process as described above. But the working devotee must always be mindful so that the creeper, which has so grown, will not be cut off. Therefore, he should be mindful of the following considerations. I just want to pause here for a moment. And just so this description is given, this is a conversation from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19, starting at text 151. There's conversation between Lord Chaitanya and Srila Rupa Goswami. So if anybody wants to go back and dive deeper into this, they can. Madhya Lila, chapter 19, starting at text 151. The plant starts as a seed and grows into a plant, but this plant is a creeper. Creepers are, it's interesting in this context, because to understand what a creeper is like a vine. It's not very strong in and of itself. Very rarely do you see a vine just grow straight up like a tree. If it grew, it would fall over. So creeper has to attach itself to something. So in the same way, our creeper has to be always attached to the association of devotees. When we're thinking of this plant that's growing up and producing fruits of love of God and penetrating the universe and going into the spiritual sky and then ultimately taking shelter of the lotus feet and then producing fruits of love of God, we should remember that this plant is a creeper. So a creeper can also be very sensitive, to the elements, because the creeper has to be attached to something. If it's not attached to the right thing, it could lose its form and be cut off. Now, Srila Prabhupada is going to give us some helpful instructions so that this does not happen. I would actually have us all say one of these, but I'm afraid it won't be heard closely by everyone who's online. So I'll say them. Please stay with us here. 1, offenses by one at the feet of a pure devotee may be likened to the mad elephant who devastates a very good garden if it enters. You may have heard of this as the mad elephant events. When we start to criticize devotees, anyone. Actually, if you criticize anyone, it's not a good thing. But when we start to find fault and place those offenses at the feet of a devotee, all our devotional efforts become nullified. And that is compared to a mad elephant. If you have a garden, and you can just imagine an elephant just comes and just stomps, boom, 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 it's gone. 1 or 2 footsteps, and the whole thing is destroyed. So that's how powerful this this anartha, or unwanted desire of criticizing and finding faults with each other, is. That it can actually destroy our devotional lives. Point number 1. 2, one must be very careful to guard himself against such offenses at the feet of pure devotees, just as one protects a creeper by all-around fencing. So in the purport, in the Majjhima Lila chapter 16, it describes this. It says, the gardener must defend the creeper by fencing it all around so that the powerful elephant of offenses may not enter. And Srila Prabhupada describes what is this fence? This comes from Srila Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction. One's devotional service is, so this is the second verse from the Nectar of Instruction. So the guard is, we have to guard ourselves against these 6 items that spoil devotional life. One is eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than is required. So just wanting to over gain more than what is necessary. 2, over endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to attain. 3, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. 4, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. Or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. 5, associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And 6, being greedy for mundane achievements. We can go back and look at them a little closer. And in that verse, there'll be more elaboration if we read the Nectar of Instruction. But this is the fence that we have to form around our devotional gardens to protect it. And if we do so, this mad elephant of criticizing won't enter into our garden. 3, it so happens that by the watering process, some weeds are also grown. And unless such weeds are uprooted, the nurturing of the main creeper, or the creeper of Bhakti Yoga, may be hampered. And I'll combine this with 4. 4, actually, these weeds are material enjoyment, merging of the self actually, these weeds are material enjoyment, merging of the self in the absolute without separate individuality, and many other desires in the field of religion, economic development, sense gratification, and emancipation. There are many other weeds. 5, there are many other weeds like disobedience to the tenets of the revealed scriptures, unnecessary engagements, killing animals, and hankering after material gain, prestige, and adoration. So anybody that's grown a garden before, the first day is very ecstatic. You're out there, you till the soil, you plant, say you're going to plant some vegetables, tomatoes, and zucchini and lettuce and peppers. You know, it's a nice spring day and you're looking ahead to the harvest, and you know, it's a beautiful thing. You're digging in the earth and you're in the process of creation of something, and it's a very happy moment. But what happens within a week's time? Weeds start to pop up. And you don't invite the weeds, you don't plant the weeds. The weeds are just naturally embedded in the soil. They're just there. Right? In the material world, in the soil of this material world, the weeds that are just discussed, material enjoyment, impersonalist tendencies, the desires of dharma, artha, kama, moksha, in order to acquire within this material world, neglecting our spiritual lives, hankering for material prestige and adoration, pride, envy, all these weeds are just embedded in this material nature and will naturally come up. And therefore we have to be a gardener and actually pull these weeds constantly every day in our spiritual life. Whenever we see the weed come up, we have to pull it out. We have to identify it. And if we don't, that weed will actually overrun the garden. Just like in a garden, if you neglect it for 2 or 3 weeks, you just plant them and you come back, all you'll see is weeds. And you won't be able to determine what is the weed and what is the actual plant that I'm trying to grow, because they'll all merge into one. The weeds will overtake and suffocate your devotional creeper. Shri Gaurnitai ki, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki, Shishi Radha Bihari ki jai. In this process of Krishna consciousness, Lord Chaitanya is giving the metaphor is that we're actually becoming a gardener. And in this process of gardening, we not only have to nurture our spiritual lives, but we have to guard against these unwanted habits, which will undoubtedly come up. Weeds in this material world in our lives will grow anywhere at any time. We'll never become free from those weeds while we're here in this material world. We have to constantly be able to pull them. And it takes time. And sometimes it's not a fun process. Just like no one says, hey, let's go out and weed, you know, with a smile on their face. No one likes to do the weeding. In fact, that's the time often when the garden is given up, because sometimes the weeding process becomes too intense. So Srila Prabhupada is giving us really, really wonderful instructions here. So point 6, if sufficient care is not taken, then the watering process may only help to breed the weeds, stunting the healthy growth of the main creeper and resulting in no fructification of the ultimate requirement, and that is love of God. 7, the devotee must therefore be very careful to uproot the different weeds in the very beginning. Only then will the healthy growth of the main creeper not be stunted. 8, and by doing so, the devotee is able to relish the fruit of love of God and thus live practically with Lord Krishna, even in this life, and be able to see the Lord in every step. The highest perfection of life is to enjoy life constantly in the association of the Lord. And one who can relish this does not aspire after any temporary enjoyment of the material world via other media. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I'm going to stop there. I spoke a little bit and read some. I just want to hear from devotees, if there are any questions, realizations, or comments based on what we've read so far. Mari Gupta Prabhu.
I like that the first two about offenses towards devotee the blasphemy of devotees. I've given a lot of thought of this offense because, this is Kali Yuga. And seems everybody has a PhD in fault finding and criticizing. And with the devotee, you have to understand that when we take initiation, we no longer belong to ourselves, but our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, who is therefore representing Krishna. So even the simplest criticism, you're basically criticizing the spiritual master, you're criticizing Krishna, thinking you know better. And it's such a fine line, and you tangibly see devotees who are just stuck in this criticism, really, not happy, not really getting the most out of their devotional life. And, but it's very easy to fall into, you could go into a room and naturally you're just going to point out fault, it's like, oh, this is wrong, this is correct. But we really have to change that mindset, if we want to get the most out of chanting. And again, I appreciate this purport a lot, because obviously my life is dedicated to serving the Maha Mantra of Nam Prabhu, the congregational chanting. And this is, a great verse celebrating Namacharya by Dustin. It's very appreciative, very informative. Just the whole class in itself and the purport.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Those at home, were you able to hear Murari Gupta Prabhu's comments?
No, I didn't hear.
They didn't hear. Okay, so he was talking about the criticism of devotees, criticism, and that naturally we have this tendency to criticize, and this was being emphasized here. But we have to take this very seriously and give up this tendency of criticism. This is a serious business of a devotee. We have to consider this very carefully. We have to give up the tendency to criticize others, this sadhu ninda. We should chant with firm faith, not in the mood of trying to find faults in others. But in this material world, finding faults is very natural. So I wanted to actually bring up a couple ways by which we can curtail this desire of finding faults. One is that anytime we find ourselves wanting to find fault, first train ourselves to find what are 3 good things for every fault that we're seeing. Try to find the good first, or at least sandwich it. This is good, okay, this needs to be improved, but then this is good. It's called the sandwich approach. They say even when talking to a person, use the sandwich approach. Say something good, then deliver what needs to be improved, and then follow it up with, again, something that is good. How that helps is it trains the mind. First, we're going to overweigh the good with the negative. So that's one way. Change that negative into a glorification somehow. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave instructions on this. He says, don't criticize devotees or non-devotees. And this is a little bit more heavy, but is very powerful. First, look at your own condition and try to purify yourself. Is there any lust in you? Is there any deceit in you? Or not? Be worried for that. Don't worry for others. Shri Guru and Lord Krishna are responsible for others. You cannot do anything to help them, so you have no right to criticize. Hare Krishna. That's from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a quote from him. So that's heavy, right? But it's very real. So if you have this tendency to want to fault find, how do you purify it? Take a look at yourself. And they say when you point a finger at one person, how many fingers are pointing back at you? You have 3 fingers pointing back at you. So take a look at yourself first. You know, is there lust in your heart? Is there deceit in your heart? And if the answer is no, then that means you got to be a little bit more honest with yourself. Krishna is the killer of the demons. We just have to surrender to Krishna, and the demon within us will be killed. But if we think that we're the demon killer, we're going to go around and expose everything that is wrong. We're going to go around and correct everything. That's what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying. Krishna takes care of that. Guru takes care of that. And there are appropriate channels for addressing such things. But if we make this our business in devotional service to be the person who's going to expose everything and criticize everything, our devotional lives will become slowly, the enthusiasm will drain slowly and slowly. And if you've been in the process of devotional service for any period of time, you can probably look at least somebody in some circumstance where this may have happened to. And we want to learn from these examples so that does not happen to us, that this mad elephant doesn't come and destroy our lives. Prabhu.
Krishna, as the spiritual master, has to come and criticize us, right? So is it possible that Krishna uses those people who criticize us as a means for our purification?
Yes. Yes. And in that way, so if you didn't hear it from Holmes, is that the spiritual master oftentimes takes the role of having to criticize or chastise us. And sometimes when we get criticized, we should see that as purification of our own false ego. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, in that regard says, we should see those who criticize us actually as our friends, and those that glorify us as actually those that aren't really trying to help us. From the material side, and it sounds very poetic, but when it actually happens, sometimes it stings a lot. But why is this? It is because we have this deep-rooted desire to be adored and recognized. We have this deep desire to be right in argument. And those desires actually keep our attachment and our engagement here in this material world. To break that sometimes requires some force. So if our desire is to be always recognized and praised, and somebody comes to you and just constantly is praising you, it is just reinforcing that. But the spiritual master has a very heavy service. And I've been told that the word guru sometimes means heavy or gravity. Just like Balaram, he is the Adi Guru. And Balaram is the controller of gravity. So sometimes they need to come and they need to cut those desires and cut it out of you. But that is the role of the spiritual master. The spiritual master sometimes has representatives, to do so. So in that regard, it is there. It's not that we're just mean-spirited and we just go around, but if we take that upon ourselves without kind of being deputized to do so, that can also be very dangerous. Yes, very good point. Thank you. Yes, sir. Hare Krishna.
I was a bit troubled by the part that's saying, the weeds are going to come up at the same time, and they have to be pulled immediately. Because, if you think about your the beginning of your devotional life, that's the time when you're least aware of, or at least for myself, I felt like I was least aware of ego, or least aware, you know what I mean, all the faults that would get in the way. I was least aware of them. So then I was just like, what? So they grow at the same time, and then it's just like you're overwhelmed. You know, by the time you realize that you're overwhelmed, so how are you gonna manage? So I started thinking, my question was going to be, how do you manage? But then I started thinking about things that have helped, and one is trying to remain humble, because there's so many devotees around that are willing to help younger devotees, and sometimes it doesn't come softly. You know, they'll say things like, in my life, I've had, you know, you're playing cartels too fast, or this thing that you made is too salty, or something, you know what I mean? So many different things. And you have two different choices. You can put up your guard, you know what I mean? And, you know, inflame your ego, your false ego, or, you know, your pride, or whatever it is, or you can take the humble position and say, oh, you're right, I was doing, you know what I mean? And this in itself, to me, seems like it's pulling the weeds, because you're actually like becoming aware of, you know, where you're at that point in, you know, in your practice. So that was just one thing that I thought of, just surrendering to, you know, devotees that actually have your best interest at heart, even though it may feel rough when they say things.
Yeah.
If you just take that humble mood of like, I'm just going to, you know, take what they say and use it to benefit my spiritual life, I feel like that's a good way. But I just wanted to ask you if you thought of any other ways that maybe at the beginning, because, you know, they are growing at the same time as your bhakti creeper. So what to do, you know?
Yeah. So thank you, Mahaprimivish Prabhu, for that. That when these weeds get pulled, sometimes it's a little bit like it can be a little bit painful, but we should see that actually this is a good thing for us. And when we reflect on our lives, so before we overreact to a situation, it's good to be able to reflect, is this good for my spiritual life? You know, and it may feel bad for your immediate material life, but for your spiritual life, it actually may be what's best for you. In the beginning of our, as you mentioned, in the very beginning of our spiritual life, that is where the creeper is most delicate. And the weeds being pulled, we may even be unaware that they are weeds. Like we may be unaware that, you know, pride and the desire for recognition is even there in our lives, but it's there. So one way I think to overcome this is through training. One has to be made aware of this from the very beginning, that part of this process of bhakti is to remove weeds. So it is not necessarily going to always be what you may think it is. Like you may be instructed to do something differently. You may be instructed to, but this is all for your help. So if there's a process of training, a bhakti program, a bhakti that teaches people the principle of surrender, that sometimes you need to overcome, you know, your own material desires, and that there's people going to be helping you. That can help in those initial stages. But if not, you just have people that are, I'm using the word trained, meaning kind of educated, maybe going around thinking that this is okay, you know, and they're unaware that these weeds actually exist. I had training, but it wasn't until maybe sometime in the mid-2000s that I even hear about this metaphor of the weed, of the bhakti garden, Um, so like I was going through all this time, but I wasn't even aware of it. But this metaphor really, I think, gives us a good visual of how spiritual life may have to go. So to answer that, I would say training, I think, is one way to assist in the early development years of one's spiritual life, to be able to remove those weeds. Yeah. Let me see if there's anybody online here. Okay.
A good scriptural reference to how a devotee should take criticism as opposed to giving it is Antalila, chapter 8, with Ramachandra Puri criticizing the Lord. And no matter what the Lord did, he's like, oh, eat more. And then he's like, wait, you're eating too much, but he was quoting scripture and reference. And eventually all the people around Lord Chaitanya were like, why are you listening to this guy? He's ridiculous. Lord Chaitanya was like, what do you mean? He's only quoting scripture. And so all Lord Chaitanya saw was like, the scripture in the right way. He wasn't even taking it that this guy was just saying it out of the wrong reasons, out of his false ego. And then you see the full side of what happens to somebody who is criticizing. It says Ramachandra Puri fell down to be a dry Mayavadi speculator. Yeah. Because then what that means is, eventually all you see is Maya. Eventually all you see is, if you start criticizing, that people grow. And then you come in, and then all you see is like, oh, this person is singing this way, or not saying this correctly, or this is, off, or that is off, or whatever. And that's all you see in Maya. That's really all it is. So you become that Mayavadi speculator. And that can happen to anybody. That was Ramachandra Puri, who was a Goswami. The god of Ishvara Puri, who was Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master. That happened. To somebody like him, how much can that happen? So that's a good parallel to how we should take it. It's hard. I don't like taking criticism, but if we can get to that point, I mean, how great would that be? Like, oh, like, wow, this is heavy, but oh, okay, I see.
Yeah. So for those, we can go back to Antalila chapter 9, 8, chapter 8, and read the pastimes of Ramachandra Puri and how Lord Chaitanya received that criticism. So 2 points. We ourselves should be very careful to criticize. Don't think ourselves as being, unless it is our, and even when we say criticize, correct, guide, nurture, maybe use those words instead of criticizing. But if we have to give some direction, we should be very careful in how we give that, and if we're not kind of authorized or deputized to do so on behalf of the spiritual master, the spiritual master's, organization, we should be very careful that we don't damage another person's spiritual life. At the same time, when we receive it, when we're on the receiving end of it, we should understand that even though it may not even be coming from the right place in another person's heart, there still may be a spiritual lesson in it for us. And maybe Krishna is delivering that message through somebody else. Krishna does multiple things at one time. Let's see if there's anybody here online that would like to speak on this. Have any questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam Prabhu. Very nice class about criticism, pride, egoism. Very nice, very inspiring, Prabhu. So I was thinking when there was discussion going on in the temple that when we are on the receiving side, then what I do usually, what I try to do is look that in everyone's heart there is Krishna sitting as Paramatma. And through that I can figure it out. I mean, that's what I try to do. I'm not there, but that, yes, that Krishna is sitting in their heart too, and the other person is in the gross material body, which is conditioned. The body is conditioned, and there are so many anarthas around us. So that way it becomes easier to forgive the person who is criticizing us. And that's what I was thinking, that if we start thinking about that, and you made a very good point, that we should think that it is through through Krishna is delivering some kind of message, but that person who is criticizing us is an instrument. Thank you, Prabhu. That's what I was thinking about it. Thank you. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you, Madhvi Gurangi Mataji. Okay. There's also I want to say a few words about Srila Haridas Thakur. I know we're getting late. I'll try to sum this up. It's a very important day in recognizing Srila Haridas Thakur. All of Lord Chaitanya's close associates, they have a spiritual identity. They were also not just, even though people who were preached to, there may have been common folk that were brought in and preached to, but his close associates they came with him into this Leela of Chaitanya Leela. So Haridas Thakur is Lord Brahma. And back when in Krishna Leela, when Krishna appeared in Dwapara Yuga, Lord Brahma wanted to really test whether Lord Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he stole his calves and the cowherd boys when they were out playing.
Yeah.
And Krishna manifested himself as those calves and those cowherd boys. So when they went home that night, nobody was missing. They didn't have the police going out looking for them, and people weren't looking. In fact, the mothers and fathers and the cows, they actually loved their kids even more and their calves even more, because it was Krishna himself manifesting as them. They were getting the cows are giving more milk, and the parents were loving their kids even more. They couldn't understand why. When Lord Brahma came back eventually to see, what had happened, was there a big problem that occurred because of what he did? He proved that Lord Krishna wasn't the Supreme Lord. He came back and he realized that nothing had changed. And then Krishna manifested himself in each one of those calves and cowherd boys. That it was Krishna. Then Lord Brahma saw, like, wow, I was wrong, and actually he was the one that was deceived. He thought he was doing the deceiving, but he was the one that got fooled and tricked. So he went and he repented. And the place where he went to go to repent was Mayapur Dham. And on there, he meditated on the form of Lord Chaitanya. This is in the Sri Navadvitam Mahatmya. And while he meditated, Lord Chaitanya came to him and says, "You will assist me in my next, because you have repented, you will assist me in my next pastime when I appear here to deliver the fallen souls. But because you've had pride, you will be born into a lower family where that pride will be taken from you. So you'll be born in that time in history. Muslims had at that point had invaded India, and was, when you look at Vedic culture, Muslims, the killing of cows was like the lowest possible degradation that you could possibly imagine. So Haridas Thakur was born into a family of Muslims. Now, to understand it historically and just how significant this is, at that time, the social structure of the caste system was so rigid that if you simply just associated with the wrong person, you had lost your credibility and you'd lost your caste. If somebody from a lower caste, or say somebody who was a Muslim, simply sprinkled water on you, you were to be considered to be an outcast. That is essentially what happened to Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. You know, they took employment in the government that was run by Nawab Hussain Shah, a Muslim governor, and they had lost their caste. They were born in a Brahminical way. So when they met Lord Chaitanya later, and Lord Chaitanya embraced them, and they offered obeisances, and they said, "I am the lowest of the lowest." Yes, it was true from a spiritual side. They considered themselves to be lowest of the lowest, the most fallen, but also from the social side of things, they were also completely rejected from all society. They had left the government. They ran away from their government positions in the Muslim government. So they were rejected from that circle. And they were also rejected. They could never go back to their Hindu families and communities. They were completely rejected by everybody. Lord Chaitanya, he was born in a Brahminical family. We know ultimately the Lord, he takes birth, but he's not of that birth. It's not due to his karma that he was born into a Brahminical family. But he took birth as in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a Mishra in a Brahminical family. And then he was a sannyasi, which is the highest spiritual order. So he was not only the highest social order, but he was also the highest spiritual order. So he was at like the pinnacle of all society. So for Lord Chaitanya to interact with Haridas Thakur, who is a Muslim, what does that say? You know, what do you think? What does that say? What message is he teaching us?
Krishna consciousness is for everyone.
Krishna consciousness is for everyone, regardless of birth, type of body that you have, that nothing is a disqualification when it comes to externals. That the purity of chanting of my devotee is what actually attracts me. And that Krishna consciousness is not sectarian. And nor is it a birthright in the sense of being, it's passed on because I'm born in a certain family. Yeah, it's quite amazing. And when you look at what happened on the day of Haridas Thakur's disappearance, Haridas Thakur, he lived in later lives with Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri. But he didn't stay there. He stayed underneath of a tree in a little hut. And he would chant every day. He didn't feel himself qualified to go to the Jagannath temple, nor would they have probably let him into the Jagannath temple, knowing that he was of Muslim birth. Lord Chaitanya would come and see him on a regular basis as he would go out and perform Sankirtan. And Govinda, Lord Chaitanya's servant, would bring him Jagannath Prasad. And he would often think, I'm so unqualified that I can't go and see Lord Jagannath, but Lord Jagannath has come to see me. This was that's why I said this verse was so tied into the mood of Haridas Thakur that we read today. He didn't protest and let's, start a march to make sure that everybody, because he wanted to go into the Jagannath temple. He accepted his condition. and kept Krishna in the center and tried to see everything as for his own purification. But he said today, Govinda, when Govinda, the servant, came, he said, today, I'm not feeling so well, and I'm not going to eat today. I'm going to fast. And he says, why? He says, it seems like you're chanting your japa very slowly. Now, Haridas Thakur chanted 3 lakhs of names. So a lakh is like 64 rounds? 192. So 64 times 3. So 1 lakh is 64 rounds. So 64 rounds takes you like a regular person, like 8 hours to chant. Yeah, times 3. Times 3. So that was his vow. And thus he got the name Namacharya. He was the teacher of the holy name by his example. So he was, in other words, he was always chanting constantly. His bodily maintenance was very low. Somebody brought him something, he would take it. There are many glories of Haridas Thakur. We'll just focus on his departure right now. And he said, today I'm feeling my body. Anyway, Govinda realized something may be wrong. So he went and he informed Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya the next day came. And he says, Haridas, how are you? And he says, my body is okay, even though his body was falling apart. He says, but my mind, I'm having some difficulty in my mind. And he says, what is it going on in your mind? He says, I'm unable to chant my prescribed number of rounds. And he says, Haridas, you're getting old. Lord Chaitanya told him, he says, you're getting old. Your body is starting to fall apart. You have proven yourself. You have demonstrated to the world, your commitment and purity to chanting the holy names. It is okay. You have my permission to reduce your number of rounds. And this is very disturbing to Haridas Thakur because he felt that he was very fallen and that he needed to chant these in order to remain fixed. Lord Chaitanya stayed there, and he knew the time was coming when he was about to give up his body. So he glanced into the eyes of Lord Chaitanya, and the description is so beautiful in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It is in the Anjalila. If we want to read this today, it's not very long. It's only about 10 pages in this book. I'll just give the synopsis to them. It's in the Anjalila chapter 11. And I'll just read this real quick. It's really nice. Lord Chaitanya inquired from Haridas, can you ascertain what your disease is? Haridas Thakur replied, my disease is that I cannot complete my rounds. Now, and Lord Chaitanya says, now that you become old, you may reduce your number of rounds that you chant daily. You are already liberated, and therefore, you need not follow the regulative principles very strictly. Your role in this incarnation is to deliver the people in general. You have sufficiently preached the glories of the holy name in this world. The Lord concluded, now, therefore, please reduce your fixed number of rounds that you chant. And then Haridas Thakur said, kindly hear my plea, Lord. I was born in an inferior family and my body is most abominable. I am always engaged in low work. Therefore, I am the lowest and most condemned man of all. I am unseeable and I am untouchable, but you have accepted me as your servant. This means that you have delivered me from the hellish condition and raised me to the Vaikuntha platform. Again, taking this mood of humility, but it was genuine humility. It wasn't just words. So then Haridas Thakur says, I've had one desire for a very long time. I think that very quite soon, my Lord, you will bring a closure to your pastime within this material world. I wish that you not show me this closing chapter of your pastimes, because this comes, because that Before that time comes, kindly let my body fall down in your presence. I wish to catch your lotus feet upon my heart and see your moonlight face. With my tongue, I shall chant your holy name, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. That is my desire. Kindly let me give up my body in this way. So Lord Chaitanya fulfilled his desire. And when Lord Chaitanya, the Haridas Thakur, he started looking upon Lord Chaitanya and looking into his eyes, and it was compared to a lotus flower, and Haridas Thakur was compared to a bumblebee, which was staring into this lotus-like flower, just trying to extract all the nectar from it. And he grabbed the feet of Mahaprabhu and held them to his chest and just started chanting, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And at that time, he gave up his life and stopped breathing. And Lord Chaitanya, who was a Brahmin sannyasi, he then picked up Haridas Thakur's body and began dancing with it. Now, not only from a social perspective was Haridas Thakur considered to be an outcast. The caring for a dead body, historically speaking, that was left to people who were the outcast of the outcast. No one just came and picked up a dead body. There was a dead animal on the road. That was set aside for a group of individuals who were considered the outcasts of the outcast because they dealt with dead bodies. So not only is Lord Chaitanya associating with somebody of Muslim birth, but he also picks him up and he's dancing around with this dead body, which is unseen, unheard of. But he broke all conventions, all barriers, to demonstrate that devotional service surpasses all material conventions. And then he arranges for his burial and places the sand on the body in the samadhi, which you can still go there today in Jagannath Puri, of Srila Haridas Thakur. Lord Chaitanya personally placed it and said, anybody who places sand on the body of Haridas Thakur and takes part in this festival, because he gathered up, he had a festival. He went and he personally begged and had his disciples beg a boga to be cooked and have a big feast in honor of Haridas Thakur. He says, anybody who's taken part in this festival in any way, will meet Lord Krishna very soon. So this has great significance, in our philosophy of Srila Haridas Thakur. And what Lord Chaitanya has demonstrated, that some of his topmost disciples, Rupa and Sananta Goswami, rejected, and he accepted them as the primary teachers of bhakti, the writers and excavators of holy places within Vrindavan. He gave them that service. Namacharya. We even say this, we repeat, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, when we say the Premadvani prayers. We give special prominence to Haridas Thakur. So this was revolutionary. And we can understand that at a time when the caste system was so strong, Lord Chaitanya broke right through it with pure devotion. Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. So tonight we'll speak also about some of the glories of Srila Haridas Thakur. I know it is late. Thank you, devotees, for staying on. I hope today's class was nourishing for you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh, so today Harinam in the honor of Srila Haridas Thakur, to gain inspiration and the blessings of Srila Haridas Thakur at Rittenhouse Square, 18th and Walnut Street. It begins at 11 and goes to 2. So 11 to 2, please come down. and chant the glories of the holy name and get the mercy of Haridas Thakur, Lord Chaitanya, and the Guru Parampara. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.